A wealthy white millionaire named Johnny stunned his elite community by adopting 7 black girls, prompting laughter and skepticism. But years later, those same people find themselves on their knees, begging for mercy. What unimaginable twist of fate has led them to this point of desperation? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Johnny Trent stood at his office window, gazing at the setting sun that painted the city skyline in shades of orange and pink. His fingers traced the silver frame of a photograph on his desk, his daughter Mina's last school picture before the illness took her. Her bright smile and innocent eyes still made his heart ache, even after 5 years. The emptiness in his sprawling penthouse apartment had become unbearable lately. Every night, he'd walk past Mina's old room, its door permanently closed, like a shrine to memories he couldn't bear to disturb. Earlier that day, during a routine investment meeting at the Children's Hope foster home, something unexpected had happened. 7 girls, all sisters, had caught his attention during his tour of the facility. They were playing jump rope in the courtyard, their laughter echoing off the brick walls. The oldest couldn't have been more than 12, the youngest barely 5. "Their situation is complicated," Mrs. Rodriguez, the foster home director, had explained. "Most families aren't willing to take all 7. We don't want to separate them, but..." She'd left the sentence hanging, her expression heavy with concern. Now, sitting in his leather chair, Johnny picked up the folder Mrs. Rodriguez had given him. Inside were 7 photographs, 7 stories of little girls who needed a home. His hands trembled as he spread the photos across his desk. "What would you think about this, Mina?" he whispered, glancing at his daughter's picture. "Would you want to share your dad's love with 7 sisters?" The thought of filling his empty home with children's laughter again made his heart race. But he wasn't naive. As a white man adopting 7 black girls, he knew the challenges they would face. The whispers at charity galas, the raised eyebrows at school functions, the prejudice that still lingered in their supposedly progressive society. Johnny walked to his window again, his reflection overlapping with the city lights. He remembered how helpless he'd felt watching Mina slip away, unable to do anything despite all his wealth and connections. But this was something he could do. These girls needed someone to fight for them, to show them they were worthy of love and protection. His decision crystallized in that moment. The emptiness in his heart had been waiting to be filled, not just with love for 1 child, but for 7. He thought of his spacious apartment, its silent rooms waiting to be filled with giggling homework sessions and bedtime stories. Johnny picked up his phone and dialed Mrs. Rodriguez's number. His voice was steady and certain when she answered. "I'd like to start the adoption process," he said, his eyes fixed on Mina's smile in the photograph. "For all 7 girls." His heart felt lighter than it had in years. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, filled with paperwork, home studies, and countless adjustments. But for the first time since losing Mina, Johnny felt something he hadn't expected. Hope. Hope for a future filled with the joy of fatherhood again, and the chance to give 7 precious girls the home they deserved. In the following days, the morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Johnny's mansion as he made one final check of the girls' rooms. Each space had been carefully prepared with new bedding, clothes, and personal touches. His hand smoothed down a pink comforter, hoping he'd chosen things they would like. When the social worker's car pulled into the circular driveway, Johnny's heart began to race. Through the window, he watched as 7 girls stepped out, their few belongings clutched in worn backpacks and small suitcases. The oldest, Maya, held the youngest's hand protectively as they walked up the stone steps. Johnny opened the heavy wooden door before they could ring the bell. "Welcome home," he said, his voice warm and gentle. He noticed how some of the girls couldn't meet his eyes, while others stared wide-eyed at the crystal chandelier in the foyer. "This is all yours?" 11-year-old Kira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," Johnny replied with a kind smile. "It's ours now. All of ours." Little Tessa, the 5-year-old, peeked out from behind Maya's leg. "Even the fancy lights?" "Even the fancy lights," Johnny chuckled. "Would you like to see your rooms?" You each get your own, but I made sure they're close together." The girls exchanged uncertain glances. They'd never had their own rooms before. As they climbed the grand staircase, their small hands trailing along the polished banister, Johnny noticed how they stayed clustered together, like a tight bunch of flowers. "I know it might feel strange at first," Johnny said, stopping at the top of the stairs, "but I want you to know something important." He knelt down so he could look into their faces. "This isn't just a house you're staying in. This is your home now, your forever home." 6-year-old Jasmine fidgeted with the strap of her backpack. "But what if we don't fit in here?" Johnny's heart ached at the uncertainty in her voice. "You already fit in perfectly," he assured them. "Because this isn't about fitting into a house or a neighborhood. It's about being a family, and families belong together." He stood up and spread his arms wide, gesturing to the hallway lined with doors. "So please make yourselves at home. Jump on the beds if you want to, put up posters, leave your shoes in the hallway. This is your space to be yourselves." Maya, still holding Tessa's hand, took a tentative step forward. "You really mean it? All of it?" "Every word," Johnny replied, his eyes growing misty. "We've got a lot to learn about each other, but we've got all the time in the world, because that's what families do. They grow together." For the first time since arriving, genuine smiles began to appear on the girls' faces. Tessa even let go of Maya's hand to twirl around in the spacious hallway, her braids swinging. The other girls began to relax their shoulders, their eyes sparking with curiosity about their new home. "Now," Johnny said, reaching for the first door handle, "who wants to see their room first?" The autumn leaves crunched under Johnny's feet as he walked up the path to the country club, where the annual neighborhood barbecue was in full swing. He had left the girls at home with their new tutor, wanting to maintain some normalcy in their schedule while he made a brief appearance at the event. The usual crowd of wealthy neighbors milled about on the manicured lawn, their casual weekend attire still managing to display designer labels. Johnny noticed how conversations dimmed as he approached, only to resume in hushed whispers once he passed. Margaret Wellington, who had always invited him to her Christmas galas, suddenly became very interested in her phone when he waved hello. Tom Bradford, his regular golf partner, made a show of checking his watch and hurrying in the opposite direction. As Johnny filled a plate with food from the buffet table, he couldn't help but overhear a conversation from behind a nearby hedge. "Did you hear about Johnny Trent's latest investment?" It was Richard Cooper's voice, dripping with sarcasm. 7 of them, can you imagine? "Well, he always did have a flair for the dramatic," replied Barbara Stevens, who lived 3 doors down from Johnny. "But this is just unseemly." "My wife says he's turned that beautiful house into some sort of charity ward," another voice chimed in. "Property values in the neighborhood are sure to plummet." Johnny's hand tightened around his paper plate, but he remained still, listening. "I suppose he thinks he's some kind of savior," Richard continued, taking in those poor, unfortunate souls. "But really, what does he expect? They're not exactly country club material, if you know what I mean." Laughter rippled through the small group, making Johnny's stomach turn. "It's just a phase," Barbara declared confidently. "Once he realizes what he's gotten himself into, he'll ship them back to wherever they came from. Mark my words." "A charity case is still a charity case no matter how much money you throw at it," Richard added, prompting more knowing chuckles. Johnny set his untouched plate down on the nearest table. The food had lost all appeal. These were people he'd known for years, had shared meals with, had trusted with his business deals. Now their true colors were showing, and they were uglier than he could have imagined. As he turned to leave, he almost bumped into Elizabeth Chen, another neighbor. She quickly averted her eyes and stepped back, as if his presence might somehow taint her. The walk to his car felt longer than usual, the weight of judgment pressing down on his shoulders. The whispers followed him, carrying fragments of words like publicity stunt and midlife crisis on the autumn breeze. But as Johnny reached his car, he stood taller. Let them talk, he thought. Let them judge. Their opinions meant nothing compared to the 7 precious souls waiting for him at home. His daughters weren't a charity case. They were his family, and he would move mountains to protect them from people like this. The following weekend, Johnny decided it was time to introduce his daughters to the community. The neighborhood's annual fall festival was being held at the local park, complete with pumpkin decorating, face painting, and carnival games. He hoped the casual, family-friendly atmosphere would make for an easier introduction. "Remember, girls, you have every right to be here," Johnny said softly as they walked through the park entrance. 7-year-old Maya clutched his right hand, while 6-year-old Jasmine walked confidently on his left, her younger sisters trailing behind like ducklings. The festive mood seemed to dim as they approached. Parents quickly gathered their children from the bounce house, making excuses about snack time or bathroom breaks. The face painting station suddenly had a "taking a break" sign placed on it when 4-year-old Sarah walked up. "Daddy," Maya whispered, tugging at his sleeve, "why is everyone looking at us funny?" Johnny's heart ached, but he kept his voice steady. "Some people just aren't used to seeing new faces, sweetheart. Give them time." They made their way to the pumpkin decorating station, where a few children still played despite their parents' obvious discomfort. 4-year-old Rachel picked up a small pumpkin, her eyes lighting up at the array of decorative ribbons and stickers. "I don't believe those pumpkins are free," came a sharp voice. Victoria Hamilton, the neighborhood association president, stood with her arms crossed. "They're $5 each to maintain our community's standards." Johnny knew for a fact that the pumpkins were included in the festival admission they'd already paid. "That's fine," he said calmly, reaching for his wallet. "We'll take 7. Victoria's lips pursed. "Mr. Trent, I hope you understand that we have certain standards in this community. Standards that help maintain our property values and quality of life. Perhaps your girls would be more comfortable at the public fall festival downtown." Johnny felt his blood boil as he watched Rachel carefully place the pumpkin back, her small shoulders slumping. His daughters had already endured so much rejection in their young lives. He wanted nothing more than to tell Victoria exactly what he thought of her standards, but he kept his composure, knowing his reaction would set an example for his girls. "Actually, Mrs. Hamilton," he replied, his voice level but firm, "my daughters and I are quite comfortable right here, and since we've already paid the admission fee, we'll take those pumpkins now." He placed 7 crisp $5 bills on the table, even though he knew he didn't need to. "Keep the change. Perhaps it will help with those standards you're so concerned about." He turned to his girls, who watched the exchange with varying expressions of hurt and uncertainty. "Come on, my loves. Let's decorate these pumpkins and make them the prettiest ones in the whole festival." The following week, Johnny stood in his study, phone in hand, finalizing the details for what would be the neighborhood's most lavish event of the season. The welcome gala would be perfect, from the string quartet to the gourmet catering, from the elegant decorations to the professional photographers. He wanted to show everyone that his daughters deserved nothing less than the very best. "Are you sure about this, Daddy?" Tessa asked from the doorway, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "Maybe we shouldn't make such a big deal." Johnny set down his phone and walked over to her. "You girls are worth celebrating. I want everyone to see you the way I do, as the wonderful, beautiful young ladies you are." In the weeks leading up to the gala, the mansion buzzed with excitement and nervous energy. The girls went dress shopping, picked out shoes, and practiced their table manners. Johnny hired etiquette coaches to help them feel more confident, though he assured them they were perfect just as they were. "What if they still don't like us?" Jasmine asked one evening as she twirled in her new purple dress. "Then that's their loss," Johnny replied, straightening her sparkly headband. "But I believe that once they get to know you, they'll see what I see." The day of the gala arrived, and the mansion transformed into a wonderland of twinkling lights and fragrant flowers. Crystal chandeliers cast warm glows over elegant table settings, while the grand staircase was draped with white roses, the perfect backdrop for family photos. As the girls got ready upstairs, Johnny could hear their mixture of giggles and nervous chatter. Hairstylists and makeup artists had been brought in to help them prepare, making them feel like princesses for the evening. "You look beautiful," Johnny said as each daughter emerged from her room. Tessa in deep blue, Tiana in purple, Maya in pink, Jasmine in yellow, Sarah in mint green, Rachel in lavender, and little Kira in white. They were a rainbow of elegance and grace. "Are you nervous?" Maya asked, studying her reflection in the hallway mirror. Johnny smiled, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "A little. But being nervous just means something matters to us, and you girls matter more than anything in the world to me." As the first guests were due to arrive, Johnny gathered his daughters in the grand foyer. They stood together, a family portrait of hope and determination. The girls smoothed their dresses and checked their hair one last time, their excitement mixed with trepidation. "Remember," Johnny said, looking at each of his daughters in turn, "you are Trents now. Hold your heads high and be proud of who you are. Tonight isn't just about meeting the neighbors, it's about celebrating our family." The doorbell chimed and 7 pairs of eyes turned toward the sound. Johnny gave them all an encouraging smile, his heart swelling with pride and love for his daughters. Whatever happened tonight, they would face it together as a family. The grand foyer filled with the soft melody of violins as the clock struck 7. Johnny watched his daughters descend the magnificent staircase, their dresses flowing like gentle waves of color. The caterers bustled about with silver trays of hors d'oeuvres and crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier's warm glow. 7:30 came and went. The vast ballroom remained eerily empty except for the string quartet, whose music echoed off the walls. Johnny checked his phone repeatedly, finding a stream of last-minute cancellations. Emergency meeting came up. Under the weather. Previous engagement slipped my mind. Tessa tugged at Johnny's sleeve. "When are people coming, Daddy?" "Soon, sweetheart," he said, though his heart ached at the obvious lie. By 8 o'clock, only 3 couples had arrived. Mrs. Henderson, the real estate agent from 2 streets over, barely touched her champagne before announcing, "Well, this has been interesting, but we really must be going." Her husband nodded curtly. "Quite a spectacle you've put on here, Trent. Very theatrical." Johnny watched as Sarah's shoulders slumped at their words. She had spent hours practicing her greeting, hoping to impress the neighbors. The Wilsons left next, muttering something about an early morning. The Petersons didn't even bother with excuses, simply slipping out when they thought no one was looking. "Maybe we should have worn different dresses," Jasmine whispered to Maya, smoothing her yellow gown self-consciously. Rachel, the oldest at 15, tried to maintain a brave face, but Johnny could see tears welling in her eyes. "We could have known this would happen," she said softly. "We don't belong here." Kira, still too young to fully understand, twirled in her white dress among the empty tables. "Look how pretty everything is," she called out, her voice echoing in the vacant space. The caterers exchanged uncomfortable glances as they stood with their untouched trays. The string quartet played on, their elegant music a soundtrack to the family's disappointment. "I'm sorry, girls," Johnny said, gathering them close. I hoped." "Can we go upstairs now?" Tiana asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't want to be down here anymore." One by one, the girls climbed the stairs, their carefully styled hair and beautiful dresses now painful reminders of their rejected hopes. Johnny watched them go, each slow step breaking his heart a little more. "Will anyone ever accept us?" Maya asked, pausing halfway up the stairs. Her question hung in the air, heavy with hurt and uncertainty. The grand ballroom, decorated with such care and optimism, stood as a glittering monument to their rejection. Crystal glasses caught the light, flowers released their sweet fragrance, and elegant place cards sat untouched at empty tables, all of it a reminder of how thoroughly they had been snubbed by their neighbors. The next morning, Johnny found his daughters quiet at the breakfast table, their eyes downcast as they pushed their food around their plates. The previous night's rejection still weighed heavily on them all. "Girls," Johnny said, setting down his coffee cup, "I need to tell you something important." 7 pairs of eyes looked up at him, filled with a mix of hurt and hope. "What happened last night?" Johnny paused, choosing his words carefully. "That was about them, not about us. Their behavior shows their limitations, not yours." Rachel, the oldest, shook her head. "But everyone thinks we don't belong here." "Listen to me," Johnny said, his voice gentle but firm. Your worth isn't measured by what others think of you. It's measured by who you are inside, by how you treat others, by the love in your heart. But school starts next week, Jasmine mentioned quietly. What if the kids there are just like the neighbors? Johnny had been thinking about this all night. Actually, I've made a decision. I'd like to homeschool all of you, at least for now. The girls exchanged surprised looks. Here? Tiana asked, glancing around their grand kitchen. Yes, right here, Johnny smiled. We can turn the library into a classroom. I'll hire the best tutors, and we'll create our own little academy. But what about making friends, Maya wondered aloud. We'll find other ways, Johnny assured them. There are homeschool groups, sports teams, dance classes, places where you'll meet people who will appreciate you for who you are. Over the next few weeks, the library transformed into a bright, welcoming classroom. Johnny hung a world map on one wall, installed a smartboard, and filled the shelves with textbooks and educational materials. He hired experienced tutors who shared his vision of creating a nurturing learning environment. Slowly but surely, the girls began to settle into their new routine. Mornings were filled with lessons, while afternoons often found them in the garden for science class or in the music room learning instruments. Johnny made sure to be present whenever possible, helping with homework or simply offering encouragement. One evening, as Johnny was tucking Kira into bed, she wrapped her small arms around his neck. I love you, Daddy, she whispered. Johnny's heart swelled. It was the first time any of them had called him that without hesitation. I love you too, sweetheart, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Later that week, he found Rachel helping Maya with her math homework in the library. The sight of his daughters supporting each other, comfortable and at ease in their home, filled him with joy. You know, Sarah said, joining him in the doorway, I was scared at first when you said you'd homeschool us, but now it feels right, like we're really a family. Johnny pulled her into a gentle hug. We are a family, he said softly, and nothing anyone says or does can change that. The other girls began gathering around them, drawn by the moment of tenderness. As Johnny stood there, surrounded by his daughters, he knew that despite the challenges they faced, they were building something beautiful together, a home filled with love, acceptance, and understanding. Johnny noticed the changes gradually. His usual golf partners suddenly had their schedules full. The invitations to business dinners dried up. Even casual conversations with neighbors became scarce, limited to stiff nods and forced smiles across manicured lawns. One morning, as he watched Mrs. Henderson cross the street to avoid passing his house, Johnny felt a familiar ache in his chest. These were people he'd known for years, some he'd considered close friends. But he squared his shoulders and turned back to his home, where laughter echoed from the music room. Inside, Tiana sat at the piano, her fingers dancing across the keys while Maya sang along. The sight washed away his hurt. Johnny had hired the best music teacher in the city, and Tiana had taken to the piano like she was born to play it. That sounds beautiful, he said, entering the room. You're making wonderful progress. In the adjacent art studio he'd created, Rachel and Sarah were working on oil paintings. Their art instructor, Ms. Martinez, moved between them, offering gentle guidance. Rachel had shown an unexpected talent for landscapes, while Sarah preferred abstract expressions of color and emotion. Dad, look! Sarah called out, holding up her canvas. The swirling colors seemed to dance, reflecting the joy he now saw in her eyes more often. Outside in the backyard, Jasmine was practicing soccer drills with their athletic coach. She'd discovered a natural ability for the sport, her speed and agility improving with each session. Kira watched from the sidelines, cheering her sister on while waiting for her turn at gymnastics practice. The youngest, Tiana, sat cross-legged on the grass, absorbed in sketching the garden flowers. Art therapy had helped her overcome her initial shyness, and now she carried her sketchbook everywhere. Johnny had transformed their home into a sanctuary of creativity and growth. The basement became a dance studio with mirrors and bars. The garage housed sports equipment for every season. A corner of the library was dedicated to creative writing, where the girls often gathered to share stories they'd written. During dinner that evening, the table buzzed with excitement as each girl shared their day's achievements. Tessa had mastered a challenging piece by Mozart. Jasmine had scored 5 goals in practice. Rachel's painting was selected for a local youth art exhibition. "I never knew I could do any of this stuff before," Jasmine said, passing the salad bowl. "At the foster home, we never got to try different things." "Well," Johnny replied, his heart full, "sometimes we don't know our talents until we're given the chance to discover them." The girls exchanged warm glances across the table. They'd grown closer through their shared activities, often attending each other's performances and exhibitions, celebrating each sister's successes as their own. Johnny watched his daughters interact, their bond strengthening daily through shared experiences and mutual support. The outside world might have turned its back on them, but within these walls, they had created something far more precious than social acceptance. They had built a true family, united by love and the joy of discovering themselves together. Johnny sat in his study, the crisp white envelope from the neighborhood association lying open on his mahogany desk. His hands trembled as he read the notice again, each word feeling like a physical blow. The formal language couldn't mask the ugly truth beneath. They wanted his family gone because of the color of his daughter's skin. "This notice serves to inform you that your current domestic arrangement has resulted in numerous complaints." The words blurred as tears of anger filled his eyes. Through the window, he could see Jasmine and Kira playing basketball in the driveway. Their laughter floated up to his study, a reminder of everything they'd built here. The thought of uprooting them again, after they'd finally started to feel at home, made his stomach churn. The notice cited property value concerns and disruption of community standards. Johnny knew exactly what those euphemisms meant. He thought of all the times his daughters had faced subtle discrimination, the canceled playdates, the whispered comments, the pointed stares. But this was different. This was a direct attack on their right to exist in this space. Johnny's mind drifted to his late daughter, Emily. She had taught him that love knew no boundaries. Now, looking at the photo of his 7 daughters on his desk, he felt a surge of protective anger. These girls were as much his children as Mina had been. He reached for his phone and dialed his lawyer's number. "James, I need your help. The neighborhood association just crossed a line." His voice was steady now, filled with determination. "They want us out, claiming we're lowering property values." As he listened to his lawyer's response, Johnny pulled out a legal pad and began taking notes. He would fight this with everything he had, his resources, his connections, his determination. The neighborhood association had picked the wrong father to intimidate. Later that evening, as the girls gathered for dinner, Johnny noticed how at ease they seemed, how naturally they moved through the house. Tiana was setting the table while Rachel helped Sarah with her homework at the counter. Maya hummed as she stirred the pasta sauce. This was their home, and no one had the right to take it from them. Johnny cleared his throat. "Girls, there's something we need to discuss." He believed in being honest with his daughters, even about difficult topics. "The neighborhood association has sent us a notice. They want us to move." The silence that followed was deafening. Tiana's fork clattered against her plate. Maya's humming stopped abruptly. 7 pairs of eyes stared at him, filled with hurt and fear. "But this is our home," Sarah whispered, her voice small. Johnny reached across the table and took her hand. "And it will stay our home," he said firmly. "I promise you that. We're not going anywhere. We're going to fight this, together." He looked at each of his daughters in turn, making sure they saw the determination in his eyes. "Sometimes people will try to tell you that you don't belong somewhere. But they're wrong. You belong exactly where you choose to be, and we choose to be here." Johnny sat across from his lawyer in the downtown office, surrounded by towering stacks of legal documents. The lawsuit against the neighborhood association lay before them, representing not just a legal battle but a fight for his family's dignity. "They're going to fight dirty," James warned, adjusting his glasses. "The association has deep pockets and powerful connections." Johnny nodded, his jaw set with determination. "So do I. Whatever it takes." At home that evening, he found his daughters waiting for him in the living room. Tiana, the oldest at 15, stepped forward with a handmade card. Inside, each girl had written a message of love and support. Sarah, the youngest, had drawn a picture of their family standing in front of their house, stick figures holding hands under a bright sun. "We're with you, Dad," Tiana said, her voice strong despite her trembling chin. The word Dad still made his heart skip a beat. It hadn't been long since they'd started calling him that, and each time felt like a precious gift. But as the weeks passed, the toll of the legal battle became evident. Johnny's phone buzzed constantly with messages from business partners pulling out of deals. His investment firm's clients, many from the same elite circles as his neighbors, began quietly moving their accounts elsewhere. One morning, as he reviewed his rapidly declining portfolio, Rachel found him in his study. "Dad," she said softly, "I heard you up late again last night." Johnny tried to smile, quickly minimizing the spreadsheet on his computer screen. "Just work stuff, sweetheart." "Is it because of the lawsuit?" Rachel's perceptive eyes noticed the growing worry lines on his face. Are we making things harder for you?" Johnny rose from his desk and pulled her into a tight hug. "Listen to me carefully," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You girls are the best thing that's ever happened to me. Everything else, money, business, what people think, that's all just stuff. But family, that's everything." Later that week, during a family dinner, Maya noticed Johnny checking his phone, his forehead creased with concern. "Another client left?" she asked quietly. Johnny looked up at his daughter's worried faces and set the phone aside. "Some people don't understand what we're fighting for," he explained. "They're choosing sides, and sometimes that means walking away from our business relationships. But you're not giving up," Kira stated rather than asked, her voice filled with pride. "Never," Johnny replied, reaching for the bowl of mashed potatoes. "We're going to show them that love is stronger than prejudice, and family is worth fighting for." His daughters exchanged glances, then Jasmine spoke up. "We've been talking, Dad. We want to help." She pulled out a carefully written budget plan. "We can cut back on our art classes and music lessons, and I can teach the younger ones basketball instead of going to private coaching." Johnny felt tears prick his eyes at their selfless offer. These girls, who had already lost so much in their young lives, were willing to give up more just to help him fight for their right to be a family. Despite the mounting pressure from the lawsuit and financial strain, Johnny gathered his daughters for their weekly family meeting. The morning sun streamed through the bay windows of their living room, casting a warm glow over their circle. "Remember, girls," Johnny said, his voice gentle but firm, "we can't control how others treat us, but we can control how we respond." Tiana nodded, thinking of the cold shoulders they still received at the grocery store. "But it's hard sometimes, Dad. The way they look at us." "I know, sweetheart." Johnny reached over and squeezed her hand. "But kindness isn't about what others deserve. It's about who we choose to be." The girls took their father's words to heart. When Sarah suggested they volunteer at the local homeless shelter, her sisters eagerly agreed. Every Saturday morning they arrived at Hope Haven Shelter, ready to serve breakfast and sort donations. At first, the other volunteers kept their distance, whispering among themselves. But as weeks passed, the girls' genuine warmth and dedication began to shine through. Miss Patterson, the shelter's elderly coordinator, found herself looking forward to their visits. "Those girls of yours," she told Johnny one morning as she watched them organizing clothes for distribution, "they've got hearts of gold." That word of the girls' volunteer work spread through the town. A small article appeared in the local paper, featuring a photo of them serving meals. A handful of townspeople, moved by their commitment to helping others, started treating them with more warmth. Mrs. Henderson, who owned the flower shop downtown, began saving fresh bouquets for the girls to take to the shelter. The local baker, Mr. Chen, would donate day-old pastries when he saw them passing by. But these small victories didn't change the overall climate in their neighborhood. During their weekly walks, curtains still rustled shut as they passed. At the community pool, other families still gathered their belongings and left when Johnny's daughters arrived. "Did you see Mrs. Roberts actually cross the street to avoid us yesterday?" Maya mentioned during dinner one evening. And the Petersons' kids aren't allowed to play with Sarah anymore, Rachel added quietly. Johnny looked at his daughter's faces, some sad, some angry, but none defeated. "You know what makes me proudest?" he said, setting down his fork. "That even with all this happening, you girls choose to spend your weekends helping others. That's true strength." The girls exchanged glances, drawing strength from their father's words and each other's presence. They continued their volunteer work with renewed spirit, finding joy in the genuine connections they made at the shelter. There, among those who had also known hardship, they found acceptance and appreciation that their wealthy neighbors couldn't seem to give. The autumn breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves as Johnny and his daughters unloaded boxes of canned goods from their van at the Riverside Food Drive. The event, held in the neighboring town of Mill Creek, drew volunteers from several communities. Johnny's heart swelled with pride watching his girls organize the donations with practiced efficiency. Their peaceful morning shattered when familiar voices cut through the air. "Well, look who's here, the charity collector and his collection." The words, dripping with mockery, came from Mrs. Davidson, their next-door neighbor. She stood with a group of women from their neighborhood, all dressed in designer clothes that seemed out of place at a food drive. "I suppose when you're trying to prove a point, you have to show up everywhere," another woman added with a sharp laugh. Sarah pressed closer to Johnny's side. He placed a protective hand on her shoulder, keeping his voice steady. "Keep sorting those cans, sweetheart. You're doing great work." The girls continued their tasks, though Johnny could see the hurt in their eyes. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she arranged boxes of pasta, and Rachel's shoulders tensed when another burst of laughter erupted from the group. "I heard they're still fighting that lawsuit," one of the women stage whispered. "Maybe if they focused more on fitting in instead of making spectacles of themselves." Johnny watched as Tiana, his oldest, straightened her spine and walked directly past the group to retrieve more boxes. She held her head high, just as he'd taught them. "Girls," Johnny called softly, gathering them close. "Remember what we talked about? Their words can only hurt us if we let them." "But why do they have to be so mean, Daddy?" Sarah asked, her lower lip quivering. "Sometimes people are mean because they don't understand that different can be beautiful," Johnny explained, kneeling to meet her eyes. "But look around, see all these people we're helping today? That's what matters. Your kindness is your strength." The girls nodded, drawing courage from their father's words. They returned to their work with renewed determination, methodically sorting donations and helping elderly visitors carry their boxes. "These go in the protein section," Tiana instructed her sisters, pointedly ignoring another round of snickering from their neighbors. "And these cereals go on the breakfast shelf," Rachel added, her voice growing stronger as she focused on the task at hand. Johnny watched his daughters work, their movements sure and purposeful despite the continued muttering and sideways glances. They'd grown so much in the past months, learning to face adversity with grace and dignity. Even now, as their neighbors made little effort to hide their disdain, his girls chose to respond with kindness and dedication to their work. "You're all doing beautifully," Johnny encouraged them, his heart full of love and pride. "Don't let anyone dim your light. Your worth isn't measured by their judgment." Months turned into years and all girls started to grow. One crisp afternoon, Johnny sat at his mahogany desk, reviewing a stack of mismatched client files when Maya peeked into his home office. "Dad, your filing system is—" She hesitated, searching for a polite word. "Interesting." Johnny chuckled, running a hand through his graying hair. "That's a kind way of putting it. I've never been great at organizing." Maya stepped into the office, her eyes scanning the cluttered shelves. "Maybe I could help? I used to organize files at the foster home." Johnny's eyes lit up. "You know what? That would be wonderful." Within days, Maya had transformed his chaotic filing system into something manageable. Her younger sister Rachel, who had a knack for computers, began helping with spreadsheets and data entry. "Look at this, Dad," Rachel said one afternoon, showing him her laptop screen. "I made a program that tracks all your client meetings automatically." Johnny leaned forward, amazed by the clean, organized display. "This is incredible, sweetheart. You've done in hours what I've been trying to figure out for months." Even Rachel, typically shy and reserved, revealed a talent for writing professional emails. "Your messages are so much better than mine," Johnny admitted after reading one of her drafted responses to a client. Rachel beamed with pride. "I just pretend I'm writing to someone I really want to impress." As the weeks passed, Johnny noticed a change in his daughters. Their shoulders straightened when they walked. They spoke with more confidence. Even little Sarah, the youngest at 5, insisted on helping by decorating client folders with colorful labels. "We're like a real business team," Tiana said one evening as they all worked together in the office, her voice filled with wonder. "We are a real business team," Johnny corrected gently, watching his daughters work. Rachel was teaching Maya some computer shortcuts while Tiana organized the day's correspondence. The younger girls sat at a small table nearby, carefully sorting papers by color. Johnny felt a warmth spread through his chest. These girls, who society had tried to dismiss, were proving themselves more capable than anyone had imagined. Their natural abilities, combined with their eagerness to learn, had brought new life to his business operations. "You know what?" Johnny announced, gathering their attention. "I think it's time we made this official. How would you all like to have real positions in the company?" The girls' faces lit up with excitement. Tiana sat up straighter in her chair. "Really? Like actual jobs?" "Actual jobs with actual responsibilities," Johnny confirmed. "You've all shown such amazing skills. I'd be foolish not to recognize that." "Even us little ones?" Sarah asked hopefully. Johnny knelt beside her chair. "Everyone has something valuable to contribute. That's what makes a family business special." The pride in their eyes made Johnny's heart swell. These weren't just tasks to keep them busy. His daughters were genuinely talented, and they deserved to know it. Their involvement wasn't charity. It was an investment in both their futures and his company's success. Johnny gathered his daughters in the company's conference room one morning, a sparkle in his eyes. "I've been thinking," he said, spreading out some colorful craft supplies on the polished table. "What if we started a special project together?" The girls leaned forward, curious. Johnny explained his idea for them to create handmade gift baskets filled with artisanal items. Everything from hand-poured candles to carefully crafted soaps and beautifully packaged treats. "Each of you has special talents," Johnny said, smiling at his daughters. "Sarah and Amy are amazing at picking color combinations. Tiana has wonderful artistic skills. Maya's organizational abilities could help with production schedules." The girls dove into the project with enthusiasm. They converted one of the mansion's unused rooms into a workshop, with different stations for each type of product. Sarah and Amy spent hours selecting ribbon colors and designing packaging, while Tiana created beautiful labels featuring her own artwork. "Look, Dad," Rachel called out one afternoon, holding up a lavender-scented candle she'd just finished. "I figured out how to make the wax super smooth." The older girls managed inventory and tracked orders, while the younger ones helped with simple tasks like tying ribbons and arranging items in the baskets. Every daughter found her own special role in the process. Word about their handmade goods spread to neighboring towns. Orders started coming in, first as a trickle, then as a steady stream. A boutique owner from the next county visited their workshop and was impressed by the quality of their products. "These are absolutely beautiful," the boutique owner said, examining one of their gift baskets. "And you say your daughters make these?" Johnny nodded proudly. "Every single item is crafted with care by my girls." The boutique owner placed a substantial order on the spot, and soon other stores followed suit. The girls beamed with pride as they saw their creations displayed in shop windows and received glowing reviews from customers. "Dad, look!" Maya exclaimed one morning, showing Johnny their sales figures. "Our little project made actual profit this month." The success of their handmade goods brought unexpected attention. A local newspaper ran a feature about their family business, highlighting how the girls had turned their creativity into a thriving enterprise. People from neighboring communities began to see the Trent family in a new light, impressed by their entrepreneurial spirit and the quality of their work. "You've all done something remarkable," Johnny told his daughters during their weekly business meeting. "You took an idea and turned it into something special." The girls exchanged proud glances. They weren't just helping their father anymore. They were building something of their own, something that showed the world what they could do. Each order they filled, each positive review they received, reinforced their growing confidence and sense of purpose. Johnny watched with pride as his daughters worked together in their newly converted workshop. The formerly empty room now buzzed with creative energy as each girl focused on her assigned task. Sarah and Tessa carefully selected elegant ribbons and packaging materials, while Tiana sketched beautiful designs for their product labels. "These colors will look perfect together," Sarah said, holding up 2 silk ribbons against a finished gift basket. "The gold and cream really make everything look fancy." The younger girls giggled as they worked at their stations, carefully measuring ingredients for bath salts and wrapping delicate soaps in tissue paper. Even little Rachel, the youngest at 5, helped by sorting ribbons by color and sticking labels on finished packages. Maya, who had always shown a talent for numbers, kept detailed records of their inventory and sales. "Dad, look!" she exclaimed one afternoon, showing Johnny her carefully maintained spreadsheet. "We made enough last week to cover all our supplies and still have profit." Their handmade goods quickly caught the attention of local boutiques. Mrs. Henderson, who owned a gift shop in the neighboring town, visited their workshop and couldn't contain her amazement at the quality of their products. "These gift baskets are absolutely exquisite," she said, examining the careful craftsmanship. "And to think they're all made by your daughters." Orders began flowing in steadily. The girls developed a smooth production system, with each sister playing to her strengths. They created everything from scented candles to artisanal soaps, each item crafted with care and attention to detail. The success of their venture brought unexpected positive attention. A small write-up in the local paper praised their entrepreneurial spirit, and customers from neighboring communities began seeking out their products specifically. "I heard about your family's gift baskets from my sister," one customer told them. "She said they're the most beautiful she's ever seen." Johnny noticed how the project had transformed his daughters. They walked taller, spoke more confidently, and beamed with pride whenever someone complimented their work. Even more importantly, they had found a way to work together as a team, supporting and encouraging each other through every challenge. "We did it, Dad," Tiana said one evening as they finished a large order. "We really did it." The other girls gathered around, their faces glowing with accomplishment and joy. Johnny and his daughters spent weeks preparing for the fundraiser at the local community center. They transformed the plain space into an elegant venue, with twinkling lights and displays of their handmade products arranged artfully around the room. The girls had practiced their speeches countless times, their words flowing from their hearts. As people began filing in, Johnny noticed a mix of familiar faces and strangers from neighboring towns. His heart swelled with pride as he watched his daughters confidently greeting guests and explaining their business venture. Maya was the first to take the stage. Her voice trembled slightly as she began, but grew stronger with each word. "Before Mr. Trent adopted us, we were just 7 scared girls in the foster system. Now we're a family, and he's shown us what true love and acceptance mean." Sarah followed, sharing stories of Johnny teaching them business skills and encouraging their creativity. "Our dad believed in us when nobody else would," she said, wiping away tears. "He taught us that kindness is stronger than hate." The audience listened intently, many dabbing at their eyes. Even some of the typically cold-hearted neighbors seemed moved by the girls' genuine appreciation for their father. Tiana spoke about their product line and how Johnny had helped them develop their talents. "Every gift basket we create represents our family's love and dedication," she explained, her voice full of pride. Just as the momentum was building and potential investors were showing interest, whispers began circulating through the crowd. Johnny noticed people checking their phones, their expressions changing from sympathy to suspicion. "Is it true what they're saying about him?" one woman muttered to another. "I heard he's using those poor girls for cheap labor," someone else whispered loud enough for Johnny to hear. Marcus Reynolds, Johnny's main business competitor, stood near the back of the room, showing something on his phone to a group of potential investors. Their faces darkened as they read whatever he was sharing. Johnny's stomach dropped as he watched several people quietly exit the venue. His daughters, still presenting their business plan on stage, hadn't noticed the shift in the atmosphere yet. But when Rachel, the youngest, stepped up to share her part, she faltered at the sight of the thinning crowd. "Our daddy," she started, her small voice wavering as more people stood to leave. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked desperately at Johnny. The other girls gathered around their little sister, forming a protective circle. Johnny rushed to the stage, his heart breaking at the sight of his daughter's confused and hurt expressions. He could hear the murmurs growing louder, the false accusations spreading like wildfire through the remaining audience. "He's exploiting them for publicity," someone said. "Those poor children should be removed from his care," another added. The girls huddled closer to Johnny, their earlier confidence shattered by the cruel whispers and judgmental stares. What had started as a chance to save their family business had turned into another painful reminder of the prejudice they faced. The rumors spread like wildfire through their affluent community. Each whisper seemed to grow more outrageous than the last, transforming Johnny's act of love into something sinister in the public eye. People who had once smiled politely now crossed the street to avoid him and his daughters. "Did you hear? He's making those girls work in his business without pay," one neighbor told another at the local coffee shop, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I heard he's just using them for tax breaks," another would reply. The neighborhood association seized upon these rumors with frightening speed. They filed a series of formal complaints, each one more aggressive than the last. Their latest notice cited concerns about the welfare of minors and questions about the stability of the household. One evening, as Johnny sat in his home office reviewing the mounting paperwork from the association's complaints, he heard soft sobbing coming from the hallway. He found Sarah, his eldest daughter, trying to comfort Rachel, who was crying into her hands. "They're saying such awful things about you, Daddy," Rachel whispered through her tears. "At the market today, Mrs. Peterson wouldn't let her daughter talk to me. She pulled her away like I was something bad." Johnny gathered both girls into his arms, his heart aching. "Listen to me," he said gently. "People can say whatever they want, but we know the truth. We're a family, and that's what matters." The other girls, hearing the commotion, joined them in the hallway. Soon, all 7 daughters were huddled around Johnny, drawing strength from each other's presence. "I heard them say they want to take us away from you," Tiana admitted, her voice trembling. "They can't do that, can they?" Johnny pulled her closer. "No one is taking you anywhere," he assured them firmly. "We're going to face this together, just like we've faced everything else." Maya, usually quiet, spoke up. "We can help you fight this, Dad. We'll show them what a real family looks like." The girls nodded in agreement, their fear gradually giving way to determination. They might be scared, but they weren't going to let anyone tear their family apart. Each daughter took turns sharing stories about their day, about the unkind words they'd heard, but also about the small moments of joy they'd found in being together. As Johnny listened to his daughters, he saw not victims of circumstance, but strong, resilient young women who had already overcome so much. Despite the neighborhood's cruelty, despite the association's threats, they remained unified, their bond growing stronger with each challenge they faced. That night, as the girls prepared for bed, they didn't retreat to their separate rooms as usual. Instead, they gathered in the family room, bringing pillows and blankets, wanting to stay close to each other and their father. Johnny sat in his favorite armchair, watching as his daughters settled in, their faces peaceful despite the storm raging outside their walls. Johnny sat at his desk, his shoulders heavy with worry as he reviewed the latest batch of hostile letters. The strain of recent events showed clearly on his face. He couldn't bear seeing his daughters face such cruelty while trying to help with the business. "Girls," he called them into his office, his voice gentle but firm, "I think it's best if you step back from the company for a while. The pressure is too much, and I want to protect you." The daughters exchanged glances, and Sarah, the eldest, stepped forward. "Dad, we're not giving up. This isn't just about the business anymore." "Yeah," Rachel added, her voice strong despite her recent tears. "People are watching us. Other families like ours need to see that we won't back down." Tiana nodded eagerly. "Last week at the shelter, a little girl told me she wanted to be brave like us. We're making a difference, Dad." Johnny looked at his daughters with pride and amazement. These young women, who had every reason to retreat from the world's cruelty, stood before him with unwavering determination. "We've been thinking," Maya said softly. "Instead of pulling back, maybe we should do more. Show them who we really are." The girls shared their plans. They wanted to expand their volunteer work, organize community service projects, and continue helping with the business. They described how their presence at local events had already inspired other families facing similar challenges. "Remember Mrs. Thompson at the food bank?" Jasmine reminded them. "She cried when we helped her carry her groceries, even after her husband made those mean comments about us last month." Johnny felt tears welling up in his eyes. His daughters weren't just surviving the community's prejudice. They were rising above it, transforming their pain into purpose. They had become beacons of hope for others facing discrimination and hardship. "We're stronger together, Dad," Sarah said, placing her hand on his shoulder. "And maybe, just maybe, if we keep showing up with kindness, things will change." Johnny looked at each of his daughters' faces, seeing not victims but warriors of love and resilience. They were right. Backing down now would send the wrong message to everyone watching their family's journey. "Okay," he agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "We'll keep going. Together." The girls' commitment to serving their community became a daily testament to their character. Every Saturday morning, the 7 sisters could be found picking up litter along neighborhood streets, their matching yellow vests visible from blocks away. Johnny would watch from a distance, his heart swelling with pride as his daughters worked tirelessly, ignoring the occasional harsh stares from passing cars. Their cleanup initiative soon expanded. The girls set up organizing stations, complete with recycling bins and trash bags, inviting others to join. At first, only a handful of people showed up, mostly curious onlookers from outside the neighborhood. "Look at how much cleaner Palmer Street looks now," Mrs. Chen, who owned the local grocery store, remarked one morning. She had been watching the girls' efforts for weeks. "Those children have done more for this neighborhood than our association ever did." The tutoring program started small, with the older girls helping younger students in the community center's basement. Sarah, the eldest, discovered she had a natural talent for teaching mathematics, while Rachel's patience made her perfect for working with struggling readers. "My Tommy's grades have improved so much," whispered Mrs. Martinez to her friend after a tutoring session. "I was wrong about them. These girls, they're special." Slowly, subtle changes began appearing in the community. Some neighbors who had previously crossed the street to avoid the family now offered tentative waves. A few even stopped to thank the girls for their work. One rainy afternoon while the girls were tutoring, elderly Mr. Wilson from 3 houses down shuffled into the community center. He had been one of their harshest critics, but now he stood watching silently as Maya helped his grandson with science homework. "I've been watching what your family's been doing," he said quietly to Johnny, who tensed at his approach. "My grandson. He talks about your girls all the time. Says they make learning fun." He paused, clearly struggling with his words. Maybe I was too quick to judge. The support grew quietly, like small shoots breaking through hard soil. Mrs. Thompson from the garden club started leaving fresh flowers on their doorstep. The local diner owner began saving 7 chocolate chip cookies every Friday, the girls' favorite treat. During one cleanup session, a group of mothers from the neighboring district showed up with water bottles and sandwiches for everyone. They worked alongside the girls, sharing stories and laughter. Johnny watched from nearby, noticing how some of his neighbors peeked through their curtains, their expressions more curious than condemning. "Dad, look!" Tiana called out one afternoon, pointing to a small article in the local paper. It featured a picture of the girls during their tutoring session, praising their dedication to community service. The article wasn't front-page news, but its positive tone marked a shift in the community's narrative about their family. The change wasn't dramatic or universal. Many still held on to their prejudices, but there was an undeniable shift in the air. Small gestures of support continued to multiply, like tiny lights flickering on in the darkness, each one making their corner of the world a little brighter. The press conference was held on a bright Tuesday morning at the community center, where the girls had spent countless hours tutoring. Local reporters filled the small auditorium, their cameras clicking as the 7 sisters took their places behind the podium. Johnny sat in the front row, his eyes glistening with pride. Maya, the eldest, stepped forward first. Her voice trembled slightly as she began, but grew stronger with each word. When our father adopted us, we weren't just given a home. We were given hope. But that hope was tested every day by those who thought we didn't belong. Rachel spoke next, describing the canceled gala and the cruel whispers they'd endured. We could have let the hatred make us bitter, she said, dabbing at her eyes. Instead, our father taught us to respond with kindness and service. One by one, each sister shared their story. They spoke of the cleanup drives, the tutoring sessions, and the small victories that had kept them going. Sarah described how some neighbors had slowly changed their minds, while Tiana talked about the business skills they'd learned helping their father. Tessa brought tears to many eyes when she spoke about Johnny. Our daddy showed us that love doesn't see color. He fought for us when others wanted us gone. He taught us that real strength isn't about fighting back. It's about standing tall and helping others even when they don't like you. Reporters leaned forward in their seats, scribbling frantically as the girls described the neighborhood association's attempts to force them out, the sabotaged fundraiser, and the withdrawn business support. But rather than dwelling on the hardships, they emphasized how these challenges had made them stronger. We're not victims, Sarah declared firmly. We're survivors who chose to thrive by lifting others up. Every piece of litter we picked up, every child we tutored, every smile we gave in return for a frown. These were our ways of showing that love is stronger than hate. The press conference made headlines across the state. Family fights prejudice with service, read one newspaper. 7 sisters show power of perseverance, proclaimed another. Television stations ran segments featuring clips of the girls' volunteer work alongside their powerful speeches. Johnny watched as his daughters handled interviews with grace and poise, never showing bitterness despite their experiences. They spoke of hope, of change, and of the importance of standing together as a family. Their message resonated with people far beyond their neighborhood, touching hearts and opening minds. Letters of support began pouring in from across the country. People shared their own stories of discrimination and praised the family's courage. The girls responded to each letter personally, turning their newfound platform into another opportunity to spread kindness. Through it all, Johnny and his daughters maintained their daily routines of service and hard work. They continued their volunteer projects, ran their business with integrity, and faced each day with the same determination that had carried them through the darkest times. Years passed, and Johnny watched with immense pride as his daughters blossomed into accomplished young women. His investment in their education and well-being had paid off in ways he never imagined. The grand mansion that had once felt cold and unwelcoming to them now buzzed with the energy of 7 driven professionals. Maya, the eldest, had completed medical school with honors. She now worked as a pediatrician at the local children's hospital, where her gentle demeanor and understanding nature made her especially beloved by her young patients. The same determination that had helped her face down prejudice now served her well in diagnosing difficult cases. Rachel and Sarah both chose nursing, inspired by their experiences volunteering at community health clinics. They worked different shifts at the regional medical center, where their colleagues often remarked on their exceptional compassion and work ethic. The sisters had a special touch with elderly patients, taking extra time to listen to their stories and ensure their comfort. Tiana discovered her calling in community organizing. She took the lessons learned from their early volunteer work and transformed them into a career, developing programs that helped underprivileged children access educational resources. The tutoring program she started had grown into a county-wide initiative, serving hundreds of families. Tessa pursued social work, driven by her own experiences in the foster system. She specialized in helping children find permanent homes, bringing the same warmth and understanding that Johnny had shown them to her work with vulnerable families. The younger girls, Kira and Jasmine, were still completing their studies, but already showing promise in their chosen fields. Jasmine was finishing her degree in business administration, while Kira was following Maya's footsteps into medicine. Johnny's initial investment in homeschooling and private tutors had given them a strong foundation, but it was their own dedication and resilience that carried them through their advanced studies. Each daughter had worked part-time jobs to contribute to their education expenses, despite Johnny's assurances that he could handle the costs. The sisters maintained their commitment to community service even as their careers flourished. They organized free health screenings, educational workshops, and mentorship programs. Their professional success added weight to their volunteer work, allowing them to create lasting change in the community that had once rejected them. The transformation wasn't lost on their neighbors. The same people who had once whispered behind their backs now sought their medical care and professional services. The daughters treated everyone with equal kindness, never letting past hurts affect their professional judgment. Johnny's business had recovered and grown stronger, partly due to the positive reputation his family had built through their service and accomplishments. He often found himself in his study, looking at photos of his daughters in their graduation gowns or professional uniforms, marveling at how far they'd come from those first uncertain days in his home. Each daughter's success story added another chapter to their family's legacy of perseverance. They had proven their worth not through words but through actions, becoming living examples of what determination, education, and unconditional love could achieve. The peaceful rhythm of the Trent family's life was disrupted when a severe flu-like illness swept through their town. What began as a few isolated cases quickly spread into a full-blown epidemic. The local hospital's emergency room filled to capacity, and medical staff worked around the clock trying to keep up with the influx of sick patients. Maya, working at the children's hospital, saw firsthand how the illness affected the youngest members of their community. She spent long hours treating feverish children, her heart aching for the worried parents in the waiting room. Rachel and Sarah's nursing shifts at the medical center stretched from 12 to 16 hours as more of their colleagues fell ill. Despite the history of rejection they'd faced, the Trent sisters didn't hesitate to help. They organized an emergency response team, converting part of Johnny's mansion into a temporary care facility for overflow patients. Tiana used her community organizing skills to coordinate volunteers and supplies, while Tessa helped arrange care for children whose parents were hospitalized. Even the younger girls pitched in. Jasmine managed the logistics of supply distribution, while Kira assisted the medical staff, putting her pre-med training to good use. Johnny supported their efforts, opening his home and resources to help the community that had once shunned them. The sisters worked tirelessly, treating everyone equally, including those who had previously shown them contempt. They saw former critics lying in hospital beds, vulnerable and afraid, and offered the same compassionate care they gave to all their patients. Many of these neighbors, experiencing the sisters' kindness firsthand, began to see the family in a new light. The epidemic hit the wealthy neighborhood particularly hard, affecting many elderly residents who had been among the family's harshest critics. The sisters took special care with these patients, ensuring they received proper treatment and attention. They remembered Johnny's lessons about responding to hatred with kindness, and now put those teachings into practice during the community's hour of need. As the local medical facilities reached their breaking point, Maya coordinated with hospital administration to implement emergency protocols. Rachel and Sarah organized rotating shifts of nurses to prevent burnout, while Tiana managed a network of volunteers delivering supplies and checking on homebound residents. The town's medical resources were stretched thin, but the Trent family's quick response and organizational skills helped prevent the situation from becoming catastrophic. Their temporary care facility in the mansion provided crucial support to the overwhelmed hospital system, and their coordinated efforts helped ensure that no one in the community went without care during the crisis. The situation took a devastating turn when dark clouds gathered ominously over the town. Within hours, a violent storm unleashed its fury, dumping massive amounts of rain that quickly overwhelmed the drainage systems. Streets turned into rushing rivers, and the rising waters made roads completely impassable. Lightning crackled across the sky as thunder shook windows throughout the neighborhood. The storm's intensity grew until it cut off all access to neighboring communities and their medical facilities. Fallen trees and debris blocked the main roads, while flooding made alternative routes too dangerous to attempt. Inside Johnny's mansion-turned-medical center, the sisters watched through rain-streaked windows as their community became increasingly isolated. The local hospital was already at capacity, and now there was no way to transport critical patients to facilities in nearby towns. Panic spread through the community as quickly as the rising waters. Parents with sick children grew desperate, and elderly residents with chronic conditions feared running out of essential medications. The town's limited medical resources were rapidly depleting, and without access to outside help, the situation seemed dire. In this moment of crisis, the community's attitude toward the Trent family shifted dramatically. Those who had once whispered cruel remarks behind their backs now turned to Johnny's daughters with desperate hope in their eyes. Maya's pediatric expertise, Rachel and Sarah's nursing skills, and Kira's pre-med knowledge suddenly became the town's most valuable resources. The sisters quickly organized their response. They converted more rooms in the mansion to accommodate additional patients, using Johnny's emergency generator to maintain power when the electricity began to fail. Maya set up a triage system in the grand foyer, while Rachel and Sarah organized their limited medical supplies to last as long as possible. Neighbors who had previously crossed the street to avoid the family now waded through floodwaters to reach their door, seeking help for sick loved ones. The sisters worked without rest, treating everyone who came to them with the same careful attention and compassion, regardless of past treatment. Local council members who had once supported the neighborhood association's attempts to force the family out now found themselves relying on the sisters' expertise. The irony wasn't lost on anyone when Mrs. Patterson, who had been one of their most vocal critics, arrived with her feverish grandson, tears of gratitude in her eyes as Maya gently examined the boy. The storm continued to rage and the waters kept rising. Emergency services were overwhelmed, and the town remained cut off from outside help. As the gravity of the situation became clear, the community realized that their survival now depended on the very family they had tried so hard to reject. The Trent sisters had become their only lifeline in this crisis, their medical knowledge and compassionate care the only thing standing between the town and disaster. The storm's relentless assault on the town continued into the night. Outside Johnny's mansion, a crowd of well-dressed figures huddled beneath expensive umbrellas that offered little protection against the driving rain. Among them stood Richard Wellington III, the president of the neighborhood association, his usually impeccable suit now soaked and muddy. "Please, my wife's condition is getting worse," he called out, his voice cracking with desperation. "We'll pay anything." Behind him, other wealthy residents who had once sneered at the Trent family now stood with bowed heads. Mrs. Hartley, who had canceled her RSVP to the welcome gala at the last minute, clutched her designer handbag like a lifeline. Mr. Peterson, who had pulled his investment from Johnny's company, trembled as he supported his elderly mother. "Our private doctors can't get through the floods," someone shouted from the crowd. "Please help us." Inside, Maya and her sisters exchanged glances as they watched through the window. The sight of their former tormentors standing helpless in the rain stirred complex emotions. These were the same people who had tried to drive them from their home, who had mocked their presence in the neighborhood, and who had dismissed them as nothing more than a charity case. "We have resources," Mrs. Wellington stepped forward, her diamond necklace glinting in the lightning. "Name your price. Anything you want." Rachel, the eldest sister, opened the front door. The crowd surged forward, but she raised her hand. "We don't want your money," she said firmly. "We never did." The wealthy residents fell silent, the only sound the pounding of rain on their expensive umbrellas. The realization seemed to dawn on their faces all at once. Their bank accounts, their social status, their influence in the community meant nothing in this moment of crisis. They couldn't buy their way out of this situation. "Please," Mrs. Hartley whispered, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "We were wrong about you. So terribly wrong. We don't deserve your help, but we're begging for it anyway." Sarah, another sister, joined Rachel at the door. "We'll help everyone," she said quietly. "Not because you're asking, but because it's the right thing to do. That's what our father taught us." The crowd's relief was palpable, but it was tinged with shame. As they filed into the mansion's foyer, these pillars of high society found themselves humbled, accepting help from the very family they had tried so hard to exclude. Their designer clothes and expensive jewelry seemed meaningless now, as they waited alongside other patients for the care only Johnny's daughters could provide. Mr. Wellington, who had led so many efforts to force the Trents out, sat quietly in a corner, watching the sisters work tirelessly to help everyone who needed them. "We didn't just misjudge them," he murmured to his wife. "We failed to see what truly matters." The Trent sisters worked through the night, transforming their father's elegant mansion into an emergency clinic. The grand ballroom, where they had once faced rejection at their welcome gala, now served as a makeshift ward. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over rows of cots where patients rested, regardless of their social status or past behavior. Jasmine coordinated with local emergency services over the satellite phone, while Maria and Rachel used their medical knowledge to treat the sick. The other sisters moved efficiently between patients, offering comfort and care to those who had once shunned them. "I can't believe how organized they are," whispered Mrs. Peterson to her husband as she watched the sisters work. "Remember when we thought they would bring down the neighborhood's standards?" The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same community that had fought so hard to exclude the Trent family now depended entirely on their compassion and expertise. When the community center's generator failed, leaving several critical patients vulnerable, the sisters didn't hesitate. "Bring them here," Rachel directed, her voice steady and assured. "We have backup power and plenty of space." As more residents arrived seeking help, the sisters maintained their composure, treating everyone with the same kindness their father had always shown. They remembered Johnny's words, "True strength lies in choosing kindness, especially when others don't deserve it." Mrs. Wellington, who had once led a campaign to have their adoption investigated, now helped carry supplies between rooms. "I don't know how you can be so kind to us," she said softly to Sarah, "after everything we did." Sarah adjusted a patient's IV line before responding. "Dad taught us that holding on to bitterness only hurts ourselves. Besides," she added with a gentle smile, "this is what community really means." The transformation of both the mansion and the community center into emergency clinics demonstrated more than just medical preparedness. It showed the power of forgiveness and compassion. The sisters worked tirelessly, their actions speaking louder than any words could about the true meaning of neighborly love. As dawn approached, Maya, the youngest sister, moved through the makeshift wards, offering water and kind words to their patients. She paused beside Mr. Wellington, who had once demanded their relocation. His face showed not just physical distress, but deep remorse. "Thank you," he whispered hoarsely. "Your father raised you well, better than any of us raised our own children." The sisters continued their work with quiet dignity, embodying everything Johnny had taught them about rising above prejudice and choosing love over resentment. Their home, once a symbol of controversy in the neighborhood, had become a beacon of hope and healing for all. The daughters worked with military precision, their months of volunteering at medical facilities now proving invaluable. In the mansion's sprawling gardens, they set up organized triage stations under weather-resistant tents, with clear pathways marked by solar lights leading to different treatment areas. Rachel directed the flow of patients with calm authority. Those with severe symptoms to the red tent, mild cases to the yellow, and anyone needing basic care to the green, she called out, her voice steady and reassuring. Johnny sat in a chair near the entrance, greeting each arrival with genuine warmth. He insisted on being present, supporting his daughters in whatever way he could. "You taught them well," remarked Dr. Stevens, who had arrived to assist. "They're more organized than some hospitals I've worked in." Johnny watched his daughters with pride as they moved efficiently between stations. Sarah managed inventory, Maya handled medications, and the younger girls ensured every patient had water and basic necessities. Their teamwork was flawless, their compassion unlimited. Mrs. Harrison, who had once led several campaigns against the family, found herself under Maya's gentle care. "I don't deserve your kindness," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "Everyone deserves kindness," Maya replied, adjusting Mrs. Harrison's blanket. "That's what our dad taught us." The townspeople watched in amazement as these young women, whom they had once rejected, worked tirelessly through the night. The sight of Johnny, despite his weakness, offering words of comfort to worried family members touched them deeply. His unwavering dedication to the community, even after years of prejudice, spoke volumes about his character. "Look at how they treat us," Mr. Wellington said to his wife, his voice thick with emotion. "After everything we put them through, they're still here, helping without hesitation." As the crisis continued, the daughters maintained their composure and efficiency. They organized shifts to ensure everyone got rest, managed supplies with precision, and treated each patient with dignity and care. Johnny's presence provided constant encouragement, his quiet strength inspiring both his daughters and the townspeople. The transformation in the community's perception was palpable. Where once there had been whispers of disapproval, now there were murmurs of admiration. The same people who had tried to force the family out now witnessed firsthand the depth of their character and the strength of their unity. "We were so wrong about them," Mrs. Peterson admitted to her husband as they watched Jasmine tenderly care for their elderly mother. "So terribly wrong." As the number of sick patients gradually decreased, the impact of Johnny's family's actions resonated throughout the community. The mansion's grounds, which had served as an emergency medical center, slowly returned to normal, but the change in the townspeople's hearts was permanent. Mrs. Wellington, who had once been among the family's harshest critics, approached Johnny one morning as he sat on his porch. Her hands trembled as she held a basket of freshly baked goods. "I don't know how to begin to apologize," she said, her voice breaking. "Your daughters saved my Henry's life. They showed such kindness, such grace." Johnny smiled warmly. "They're remarkable girls," he said softly. "They've always been." Throughout the town, similar transformations occurred. The neighborhood association, which had fought so hard to remove the family, formally withdrew all complaints and issued a public apology. Mr. Peterson, the association's president, stood before a crowd at the community center, his voice heavy with emotion. "We were blind," he declared. "We let prejudice cloud our judgment and missed the opportunity to know an extraordinary family. Johnny Trent and his daughters have taught us what true character looks like." The local newspaper ran a front-page story titled, "Angels Among Us," featuring photographs of the daughters working tirelessly during the crisis. The article detailed not just their recent heroism, but also their years of community service and volunteer work, efforts that many had previously ignored or dismissed. At the grocery store, the coffee shop, and other local establishments, Johnny's daughters now received warm smiles and heartfelt thanks. Children waved to them on the street, and elderly residents blessed them as they passed by. The same people who had once crossed the street to avoid them now crossed it to greet them. "It feels different now," Sarah told her sisters as they walked through town one afternoon. "Like we finally belong." The story of Johnny Trent and his 7 daughters spread beyond their community, inspiring others with its message of love overcoming prejudice. Local churches and civic groups invited the family to speak about their experiences. People were moved by their journey, how a father's love and his daughter's resilience had transformed not just their own lives, but an entire community. "Your family reminds us of what matters most," Reverend Matthews told Johnny after a Sunday service. "Love, forgiveness, and the courage to stand firm in both." The daughters, who had once felt like outsiders, now found themselves embraced as valued members of the community. Their business ventures flourished as people eagerly supported their endeavors. The handmade goods they had started creating during harder times became sought-after items, symbols of hope and perseverance. Johnny watched these changes with quiet joy, seeing his daughters finally receive the acceptance they had always deserved. Their home, once a target of scorn, became a symbol of unity and transformation. The grand mansion that had once stood as a focal point of controversy now represented hope and healing for the entire community. At the next town hall meeting, Johnny stood before the packed room, his daughters standing tall beside him. The same space that had once witnessed cruel whispers and cold shoulders now held a different energy. Respect and gratitude filled the air, but there was still unfinished business to address. Johnny announced, his voice steady and clear. "This community has shown remarkable growth, and we believe in being part of its future." A wave of relief swept through the crowd, followed by appreciative applause, but Johnny raised his hand, indicating he wasn't finished. "However," he continued, "we have one condition. The neighborhood association leaders who targeted our family must step down. Their actions caused deep harm, and true healing requires accountability. The room fell silent. Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Blackwood, and Mr. Hamilton, the association leaders who had spearheaded the campaign against Johnny's family, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One by one, community members stood up to voice their support for Johnny's request. Mrs. Wellington, her voice trembling with emotion, spoke first. "These leaders tried to drive away the very people who saved our lives. They don't represent our values anymore." Others followed, sharing stories of how the association's prejudiced actions had divided the community. The momentum built as more residents expressed their agreement with Johnny's condition. "I move that we hold an immediate vote," called out Mr. Roberts, a longtime resident. "All in favor of removing the current neighborhood association leadership, raise your hands." Hands shot up across the room. The count was overwhelming, nearly unanimous. The message was clear. The community chose Johnny's family over those who had tried to exclude them. Mr. Peterson stood up, his face flushed. "The community has spoken," he said stiffly. "We will tender our resignations, effective immediately." The other association leaders nodded in agreement, gathering their things and leaving the meeting hall. As they walked out, Johnny's youngest daughter whispered to him, "Did we do the right thing, Dad?" Johnny squeezed her hand. "Sometimes, sweetheart, doing the right thing means standing up for what's just, even when it's difficult." The townspeople approached Johnny and his daughters, expressing their support for the decision. Many apologized for not standing up sooner, promising to build a more inclusive community together. The town gathered in the Central Park on a bright Saturday morning. Colorful banners fluttered in the breeze, and rows of chairs filled the grass. Johnny and his 7 daughters sat in the front row, touched by the turnout of nearly every resident. Mayor Thompson stepped up to the podium, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Today we honor a family that taught us the true meaning of strength and forgiveness. When our community was at its worst, they showed us their best." One by one, community members came forward to share their stories. Mrs. Chen, wiping tears from her eyes, spoke about how Johnny's eldest daughter had saved her mother during the epidemic. "You didn't just treat her illness, you sat with her, held her hand, and gave her hope." Mr. Roberts, the local grocer, shared how the younger girls had helped deliver food to elderly residents during the crisis. "I watched these children, who we once shunned, work tirelessly to help others. They showed us what real character looks like." Even little Tommy Jenkins, age 10, stepped up to the microphone. "When I was sick, the Trent sisters made me laugh with puppet shows while they gave me medicine. They're like angels." The mayor unveiled a beautiful bronze plaque mounted on a stone pedestal. Engraved on its surface were the words, "In honor of the Trent family, whose unwavering strength, boundless compassion, and dedication to our community taught us that love conquers all barriers. Their resilience in the face of adversity has forever changed our hearts and our town." Johnny's daughters clung to each other, tears streaming down their faces as they read the inscription. Johnny wrapped his arms around them, his own eyes misting over at this public acknowledgement of their journey. "This plaque," the mayor continued, "will stand in our town square as a permanent reminder of the family who showed us that true community means accepting and supporting one another, regardless of our differences." The crowd rose in a standing ovation, their applause echoing across the park. Many held signs reading, "Thank you, Trent family," and "Love wins." The same people who had once crossed the street to avoid them now reached out to embrace them, their hearts transformed by the family's example of grace under pressure. Johnny stood with his daughters, their hands linked in an unbreakable chain as they watched the gathering before them. The morning sunlight caught the bronze plaque, making it gleam like a beacon of hope in the park. Around them, the community that had once treated them as outsiders now pressed close, offering hugs, handshakes, and tearful apologies. Maya, his eldest daughter, squeezed his hand. "Dad," she whispered, "look at how far we've come." The other girls nodded, their faces glowing with joy and pride. Little Kira, his youngest, wrapped her arms around his waist, and Johnny felt his heart swell with love. He remembered the lonely days when they'd faced cold stares and cruel whispers, but those memories now seemed distant, like shadows chased away by the warm light of acceptance. Neighbors who had once slammed doors in their faces now approached with plates of home-baked cookies and invitation cards for community events. Children who had been forbidden to play with his daughters now ran up to them, asking for hugs and sharing excited stories about their day. Mrs. Peterson, who had been one of their harshest critics, approached with tears in her eyes. "Your family changed this town," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You showed us what real strength looks like." The town square buzzed with activity as people mingled, sharing stories of how the Trent family had touched their lives. Some spoke of the daughter's tireless work during the epidemic, others of Johnny's unwavering dignity in the face of prejudice. The very place that had once felt so hostile now embraced them with open arms. Johnny looked at each of his daughter's faces, faces that had grown stronger and more beautiful through their struggles. They had transformed from uncertain foster children into confident young women who knew their worth. More importantly, they had maintained their kindness even when faced with cruelty, just as he had taught them. The community gathered around them, forming a circle of unity where division had once stood. Children of all backgrounds played together on the grass, their laughter a testament to the changes that had taken place. The barriers that had once separated them had crumbled, replaced by bonds of understanding and respect. As they stood together, watching their neighbors mingle and celebrate, Johnny and his daughters realized they had accomplished something greater than mere acceptance. They had helped create a community that now understood the true meaning of family, one that went beyond blood ties and social status to embrace the power of love and forgiveness. The once divided neighborhood had become whole, united around the very family it had tried to reject. Johnny and his daughters stood at its center, their journey from ridicule to respect complete, their story woven permanently into the fabric of the community's history. If you enjoyed the story of Johnny and his 7 daughters, I handpicked this next story that will touch your heart. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.